All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the New Now. I'm delighted to have Candace Hill back on with us. Today, we are going to discuss ancestors, ceremony, and prophecy related to her lovely book and her hub. You'll be able to find all those articles on Walking in Balance. We will leave all the links below. Hello, Candace.
Good afternoon. Nice to be with you again and to be speaking with the Agora audience. Um, I'm very excited. It's wonderful to be able to share knowledge and share, well, my own personal experience on this very interesting journey. uh, and today's topic and what I'm discussing is about ancestors, ceremony, and prophecy. And it's all tied into my first book, which I believe I mentioned to the audience our last interview we did. And so I want to begin with that. I want to begin with, how did this book come about? Well, it started when I was 10. I was 10 years old. I wrote my first little article, and I remember saying to myself, I really would like to write a book one day. And that's where the seed was planted. Fast forward, I was probably in my later 30s. I met a man by the name of Robert Goswell. He was a mestizo like myself, a mixed blood, but he spent a lot of time with the Hopi people down in New Mexico. And he was a writer. He had written 3 books, and he said, I think it was the second time we talked, he says, you need to write a book. And I already knew I did. And I'd also like to share what he said to me on that I think it was the first call. When I started chatting to him, he got really emotional, and he said, "You're a grandmother." And I was thinking, well, I'm not a biological grandmother yet. What does he mean? And he told me how his first elder was Frank Foolscrow, who was a very respected Lakota medicine man. He was what we call, well, very holy, very sacred. And he gifted my elder with his first pipe. And after a couple of years, he sent him out for the next 7 years to spend time with grandmothers, with medicine women like myself. And later I realized what the word grandmother meant when he said that. It means any woman who walks in the old ways of her grandmothers. In my case, I call them cookums in Cree. So he planted the seed, and I waited. And it was in 2011, I moved away up into the mountains in a beautiful area called Turtle Valley. And it was just the perfect environment. And I thought, it's time. I need to start writing these books. Now, this first book, my reason for writing it was for my children, for my grandchildren, my great grandchildren, to know who I was and what my journey was about. So that's where I put pen to paper, decided, okay, 1 hour a day, I got to start doing this, right? And that is where, shortly into this, I'll call it a journey, that it began to take on a life of its own. And that's where I believe my ancestors stepped in to help guide me. And so I really, really respect and understand artists more today, because when you paint or whatever you're doing, carving, I mean, it's like a ceremony. You're connecting with, your helpers, if they're animals, those all things are happening. And I observed that with myself, that I started getting insight. For example, almost right away, I was guided to divide the book into the medicine wheel. So, for the audience that may not know much about the medicine wheel is a big part of our culture here on Turtle Island. We have at least over 400 medicine wheels we know that are all, they all come to a wheel in Wyoming called Medicine Mountain. And I've actually been there in 2002, did ceremony there. Because in earth astrology, I'm connected. I work with the snake medicine, which actually is also, being on Anishinaabe, we have the snake clan, which is a healing clan. But when I was there, I put snake medicine down in copper and did not know that that wheel is dated. It's about 10, maybe 20,000 years old. And I found out from an elder, it's the beginning wheel. So in our culture, when someone's going to carry a bundle, meaning a pipe for the people, they will go bring their bundle there, get it blessed, and then begin their walk. And so from a plane. It was a photographer observed all the medicine wheels on Turtle Island are connected like the spokes of a wheel to this medicine mountain in Wyoming. Okay. So that being said, I decided, yes, the book is going to be divided into the medicine wheel. So we start in the east, and each of these directions has significant teachings. I could spend a whole day teaching about the medicine wheel. But the first part is the east. We call that the beginning part of the wheel, and that's when you come in. So that's when you're a child. And the east also relates to each direction has an animal. It is the eagle, and it represents the element of the air, and also the medicine, which is tobacco, and the physical, which makes sense because you're spirit and now you're coming into a physical body, right? So the first part of my book talks about my childhood. And again, I'm not going to go into great detail, but I had a very tumultuous, interesting birth. One that I'll say I most definitely wanted to be here. But because of I had thick blood, the doctor told my family they had to get a crib on wheels, and I couldn't cry the first year. So I look at that and I go, well, it gave me a lot of love, and I believe it's helped me to be a strong person because I had that as a baby that first year. So so in the book, so I want to just back up a little bit about the name of my book, and I want to show everybody this. And this is where ancestors come in because I lost my mom when I was 22. And 3 months after she made that journey, she came in a dream to myself, my eldest brother, her best friend, and her only sister. She came to visit us in a dream. And, it was a bit surprising because in the dream, she says, I'm not gone, I'm here, you know. And from that dream on, my mother has helped me from the spirit world, and I'd say as an ancestor, in many, many ways. And I believe that she maybe possibly knew my journey. I'm not sure, but she has helped me more from the spirit world than probably if she'd been here in the physical, right? So, about 4 years before I'd started writing my book, because it took about 5 years, I wrote the two books. My father called me one day and gave me the name, which I think I shared in the past video. She wears moccasins and carries a big stick. So the last time I spoke to my father, I let him know, well, Dad, I've decided that that is going to be the name of my book. He said, Dear, that sounds wonderful. So about not even 2 years ago, my dad passed over about 7 years ago, I believe it was now. And I was missing him. This is about 2 years ago, shedding some tears. And I came home and I had a call from a friend of mine who is also a medicine person. She works with the birds and, is a hollow bone like me, a spirit talker. And she was guided to make something for me. So she didn't tell me what it was till I met her. And then she gifted it to me. And what she said to me is, she says, Your dad came to me and he told me that I needed to make this for you. And so I'm sharing this today because to let people know that our loved ones are always with us. They've dropped that physical, but they watch over us, they love us, they guide us. And even back in 96, when I received my spiritual name, my elder told me, always listen to your ancestors. They will never steer you wrong, they will guide you. And so I just want to, just stress that right now, right? So I would like to show everybody this that was made for me. So it's a rattle, and you can see the top. And look what that is. There's a medicine wheel. And that's where my book starts here, the yellow. That's the place of the eagle. You come in as a child. And wouldn't you know, it has feathers on here that are my helpers. And this sister did not know that. You can see these here are flickers. And what does a flicker represent? It represents a warrior. And I'm an Ogichita, which is a female warrior. And it's got some crystals and the ones that I work with. It's got amethyst. Amethyst represents the people, which I am here to serve the people. And it's got a big chunk of rose, which represents rose quartz, which represents the heart and love, right? And the eagle, I must say too, also represents love and healing. And then it was made onto a stick. And down at the bottom, you can see Again, four beads that represent the medicine wheel, the four directions, the four stages of life, and a little moccasin. And there we go. So my dad made that for me through a sister to let me know that he is with me and guiding me. So I really wanted to share that. Okay. Um, so I guess I could say that the writing of this book was a ceremony. It really was. And I would write things, or I'd think I was finished, and then I'd get this message, no, put the book down, have to wait for certain things to happen. And I'll share a few things that happened. So I, my father passed away, and 2 weeks later, my elder Wolverine, who both of these men, they were different, but they were very similar. And why do I say that? Is they were upstanding men. They're what I call true warriors. They had the utmost respect of women. They were my teachers, many, many important things in my life. And they both passed away 2 weeks apart. So I was able to put them into my book and acknowledge them and honor them for the beautiful men that they were in my life. And so that's one example. Then when the actual manuscript was done, and I thought, okay, I'm done. Um, I'll mention that the previous summer, this was in, I think, 2017 or 16, sorry, I had gone back home and was doing my third year of sun dancing. And I had my niece and her daughter, who is a bear like me. I actually saw her when she was maybe 4 weeks old with my bear drum that I had at the time. And so she came to the ceremony, she came into the arbor. It was very beautiful. Well, literally, I think it was, a month after my manuscript was done, I got a very, very upsetting phone call that my great niece, her life had been taken. And it was the day before our missing and murdered women day, which I was supposed to go and do, lift my pipe and do a ceremony. So that, as you can imagine, was quite a shock. I had to leave for 3 weeks to be with my family back home. And so when I came back, I got a hold of my publisher and said, I can't, I hadn't even think of the book, give me a few months. And it was a family member that said, you know what? You should dedicate this book to her. And I thought, I will. And I want to share something really, really beautiful. So this niece, great niece, was 19 when she passed. But when she was about 6, she said to her mom, I see heart colors. And her mother said, heart colors? She says, what do you mean? And she said, well, around certain people, I see colors, green, red. Now, her mom didn't know anything at that time about chakras and, the colors. So she started to do some research and asked her daughter to draw pictures. So Brittany drew pictures, stick people with hearts. And so she'd say, well, the green, that's heart people. And the thing is, she knew what all the chakras were and what the colors were. So her mom then took that and made it. And I want to show everybody, just give me 1 second. She ended up making it into a book. And it's called um, I See Heart Colors. And my niece and her husband and their daughter went across the country, went down to the United States, and did a book tour of I See Heart Colors. And I believe Brittany was 7. Brittany was a bear, she was a healer, and she was a counselor to many people, right? And so I wanted to mention that, how, again, I was guided, just wait, you're not done yet, right? So, absolutely, again, guided by the ancestors. And then, sadly, 3 months after that, her uncle, my nephew, passed. I do believe it was really from a broken heart of the loss of Brittany. He passed away. So I was able to put him in there too and acknowledge this special nephew of mine. So I want to mention too, another thing that I was guided with this book was to have 13 chapters. So I want to mention talk a little bit about the turtle. And so the turtle to our people, as you've probably heard me say, North and South America is known as grandmother turtle. Again, one of the oldest animals on the planet. And that's how we've always referred to her for probably thousands of years as grandmother turtle. Now, what's unique about the turtle is on the shell of every turtle on the planet, is on the top, you have the 13 squares that represent the 13 moons that my people used to follow. And then around the outside is 28 squares that represents the 28 days between each moon and a woman's moon time. Okay. I also just, it's coming to my mind right now. The month before my niece Brittany passed, she had come across a very old turtle in Manitoba. Like we're talking very large. And she stopped and videotaped herself helping this turtle across the road. After she passed, I learned the Anishinaabe turtle song in her honor. And so I sing it often, and it is in honor of her. So back to the 13. So the 13 was a calendar, around the world, right? So this book is also 13 chapters. And the last chapter, of course, is about the women. And this is where I'll share with the audience a little bit about prophecy. So as I believe I said in the first interview, I spoke about how when I was 19 and 20, and I had my spiritual awakening, which really was stepping into my gifts, and that first dream that I had, which was of peace. And so when we talk about prophecy, prophecy usually is through medicine people. I mean, throughout history, I mean, you look at the Bible, a lot of that is things that visionaries and prophets seen of the future, right? So I do believe I was shown the future, but it wasn't till I was, 40 when I started to learn, well, no, probably younger than that, learning about the prophecy of White Buffalo Calf Woman, which again is in my 13th chapter. And when she left the people, she said, I will be back in the time of peace. And I think it was 2 months ago, there was another white buffalo born in Kansas, I believe it was. So we've had a lot of white buffaloes born since 92. So yes, this time, and I believe it was about 30 years ago, I started to learn about the ancient Veda texts. And they talked again about this time, prophecy of this time as being a cycle that humanity goes through, I think, kind of loses their way. And they talk about it from the aspect of the age of Kalug, age of darkness, to the age of light. And what's interesting about that is when I was it was when I was working on my second book, I went back to look at that belief from the ancient Veda texts. And you know what's interesting is it's stated in there that they look to the Big Dipper, which is the big bear, that's part of this prophecy. And they said that the end of this will be in 2025. And so again, you look at timelines and it's like, and I'm a bear. And I think I shared with you my invitation through the ancestors. This was not, something I decided to do, but my trip to Mongolia last year. That was Odama called me, said the ancestors want you to come, and and there I was, right? And that's the other thing, as I went along on my journey and got to understand myself and my gifts, I've had that communication since I was old enough to probably speak with the ancestors, with the spirits. And so, that's why I use the term now a spirit talker, right? So that ability to hear them, because I always say it's kind of like two worlds. We have the physical realm that we live in, and then we have the spiritual realm, which, is where we go when we pass. And so for people like myself, and it took, and I always explain to people, this has not been an easy journey. When you start to realize you have these certain gifts, and unless you're blessed like I was, having good elders that I could call and say, okay, I don't know what's going on here, to guide me, but to be able to get to that place of accepting that I walk in two worlds. I walk in this world, but I also have one foot in the spirit world, right? And um, so as I said, my last chapter of the book, I talk about the women. And funny enough, back to when I was the age of 13, that's when I remember having another thought of how old will I be in the year 2000? And I was going to be 33. And if you understand numerology, I've had numerology done and I'm a two. And so everything in my life happens in twos. And two to me is feminine. And so when the year 2000 happened, that was the first year I got my first email. And my outgoing message was the women and the grandmothers. It's time for the women and the grandmothers to stand up. So there was my mantra the last 24 years. But it's funny that, you know, I was 33 at that time. And I know 33, if we look at numbers, is also, a powerful number, right? So many things I can talk about. I'm going to go through my book and I'm just going to read a couple of things. Okay. And I shared with you before we started this interview that I feel this book is more important today in 2024 than when it originally came out in 2018, because not a lot has changed. But even if you read the back last paragraph on the back of my book, I'll read it. It says, I will take you on a spiritual journey that reveals the unspoken, unseen world of spirit, where inanimate objects are brought to life, where the voiceless are given a voice. We all have no choice now but to become the fearless warriors for our next 7 generations. They are depending on us. And, when we look at what we've been through as human beings on this planet the last 4 years, I mean, we've all grown, stretched, we've been tested, we've been challenged on many, many levels. But, I feel we've passed the test, we're here. And I think, as you and I have shared, Lorenzo, it's no accident that our paths have crossed at this time, right? I just want to notice that it's 3:33 right now, and that's 9. And when I left Mongolia, the clock said 3:33. When I landed in Mongolia, it said 3:33. And Odema said, well, that's 9. That is our sacred number. So and I want to mention this Friday is when the World Shaman International Festival happens a second time. Of course, I'm not there this year, but I'm there in spirit. So, so I just want to read from the first chapter, chapter 1, the miracle of my birth. I just want to read a wee bit here. For those of you who've chosen to open the pages of this book, please join me as we travel through the adventures of my life, the joys, the pains, the happiness, the sadness, the excitement, the fear, and the aha moments when you get it, just like a child seeing and feeling the rain for the first time. Our first experiences are such a miracle of life. So I just wanted to read that. And just give me 1 second. This was when I was on my 4th fast. This time was inside of a sweat lodge. And a sweat lodge is a representation of the womb. And it is shaped like a dome. And when we go in and we shut the door, it's all black. And we sit on our Mother Earth, and it's, as I say, representative of being inside the womb. Okay. So I did 2 nights and 2 days. I never left. No fire, no water, no food. And you stay inside the mother's womb. And so I just want to read a few things. My 4th fast was again in the sweat lodge, which was a very challenging experience. I recall doing a great deal of crying for my adoptive family in that lodge. The last day was especially difficult, and I started to get sick. I was told by the spirits that I had suffered enough and should break the fast, go into town to a native craft store, which ironically was owned by the Cree woman who had given me my spiritual name. I listened to the old ones and broke the fast and drove into town. And I'll just mention that I walked into that store. I was only in there not even 5 minutes, and 2 women walked in, and one was Jewish, and her name was Alexandra. And I looked at her and I said, I've been on a fast. Let's go have some tea. And she gifted me with a special blue stone from Israel, which is another whole story into itself. And she said, this stone is for you. And guess what she said, Lorenzo? She said, it represents the turtles
Hmm.
and it represents the water. Because when my sister, she was there right after 9/11 happened, because she'd been having visions of it for 2 years. She lived there in Israel for 5 weeks with a group of people that was developing a technology to clean the water. And so this man gave her this blue stone. And he said, this stone is connected to the water and the turtles. And he said, when the turtles start coming out, that is a sign of time of change. So she gifted me that stone, but she said, it's not for you. You'll hold it for a while. But she said, one day you need to give it to the grandmothers. And I was part of an international group called the Grandmother Wisdom Foundation. And on my first journey with them to France in 2008, that blue stone went to them. And that first journey to France was when myself and 15 other bear healers like me, there were 16 of us, which again is a sacred number, we released the first grandmother cave bear. That was after a 4-day healing ceremony. And so she is one of my helpers, and I can call on her. So I want to read another little bit of my book here. Okay. My second trip to France with the Wisdom of the Grandmother Foundation, and this was in 2011. I was very pleased to go and felt blessed to be part of a powerful bear releasing ceremony with my brothers and sisters of France. Actually, I'm not going to, there's so much I'm going to read. I'm just going to get to the nitty gritty. So I started having a dream. This was before the trip. I started having a dream of a bear, started coming and asking me for help. So I called Nan, who was the woman who started the Wisdom of the Grandmother Foundation, and I said, I don't know what's going on. She said, oh, yeah, that bear has been coming to us for 2 years and he needs to be released. We're going to be going this spring. Would you like to come? Again, being a bear, hearing the word bear, I'm like, yes, I'm there. So I brought my son, who was 18 at the time, and together with other bear medicine people, we released a grandfather cave bear. This was in the north of France. The first one we released, the grandmother cave bear, was in the south. So this part I was
How
reading
did you
was
release them?
spiritually. So we had to do a ceremony for 4 days where you connect with the spirit of that relative, and using things like crystal to cut that, because it's a spiritual thing you're doing, right? And specific medicines and specific prayers. So it was a 4 day. And that second time, that is where I had been asked by my elder to find the red medicine. She didn't, because that's the thing with elders. You see, they speak in allegories. They don't tell you everything, they just give you a piece. So that's all she said. So for 5 years, I'm looking for a red plant, a red medicine. After my son found the cave, because he was the one that found the cave where the grandfather cave bear was, on our return up to the cave, I was by myself, and there was a little shelf, and there was this red stuff. I didn't know what it was. And I picked it up, and the ancestors spoke to me, and they said, okay, put some on your hand. They said, spit on it, put it on your bottoms of your feet and your face. So I listened. I always listen. So I did that, went up, we did first part of the ceremony. And it wasn't until we got back to Canada that I was informed by an elder. She said, that's red ochre. And that's at the time that I realized I carried another gift, another ceremony for the people I didn't know I had. And I was told you have to wear that medicine as protection so that bad spirits can't go in you. And so, yeah, so I still use that medicine. Okay. Let's see. And yes, I just want to go to the back here, chapter 13. And it's titled There Are Only Solutions, because, for probably 20 years, I say to people, there's no problems, only solutions. So I teach people focus 80%, 20% on the problem and 80% on the solution, right? So that's what this chapter is. And underneath, I have a quote from a famous writer and poet. Her name was Simon Bihani, and she said, to stay alive, you must slay silence. And I love that quote because, it's about speaking, using our voices, sharing our knowledge, right? Not keeping our mouths covered. And I'll just read this little bit. I believe the solutions are and will come through the women. 30 years ago, I had my first true vision. I believe with all my heart that we are going to see it come to fruition. We are multidimensional beings living in a multidimensional world, and everything affects us in some way, either positively or negatively. And then the next little part, this is important, I'd like to read. It says, our sacred spiritual blood. So this is a little poem from a sister. In the Native American tradition, if you wanted to destroy a village, you simply destroyed the Moon Lodge. the place where the women gathered every new moon to intuit insights to govern the tribe. It stands to reason that the fastest way to rebuild our global village is to reinstate the tradition of the Moon Lodge or the Red Tent. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave it there for today. I'm just really honored, my dear brother Lorenzo, that you've opened the space for me. My prayers were heard because when we first met, I had been saying to the ancestors, um, I pray that someone will come in my life to help promote me. And that was one of the first things I remember our first conversation because I wanted to let you speak and see where you were at, where your heart was at. And the first thing you said to me was, we need to start listening to the women and get that guidance. And I thought, okay, this is a true brother that has no ego, who is pure of heart. And I thought, okay, this is good. We resonate, right? And so I just want to acknowledge you for that and holding the space for both of us to be able to share and for me to be able to share my journey, right? Because it's a journey. So with that, I'll say miigwech, hi hi.
It's been beautiful. Thank you so much, Candace. Seems maybe we've come to a new title for this particular chat, Walking in the Old Ways, because I think you've discussed, how you've gone from there to here, through ancestor
Yes.
ceremony and prophecy. We can go into more details with any of those. I think those would
Yep.
be specific chats, because I have many
Yes.
questions on either of those topics, but I think you've given us beautiful overview of yourself and your book. We will put this up as soon as possible. Please support. We're going to have some
Mm.
links for Candace's PayPal. Her book is obviously available. It's already available on her hub and her website. You can pick it up there. And if anybody has any questions or suggestions or anything they'd like us to share in future chats, don't be shy. I can pass it along to Candace, and her email is also on her hub. You can reach out to her directly. Candace, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I hope to talk to you again soon. I think we will over the next couple of weeks. And if anybody wants to join us after that, please don't be shy. We're more than welcome for all the loving assistance.
Miigwech.